Hey everybody, just a few days left as we're together on Easter Sunday soon. Today we read the last section of John chapter 18 where Jesus is now brought before not a Jewish leader, but he's ushered into the presence of Pilate. And what's interesting, I think one of the fascinating things in the opening of this is that when the Jews bring Jesus to Pilate, what they're doing is they're not hiding their agenda. Pilate first says, "What are you doing? Deal with him yourself." And they say, "Well, we can't execute anybody." So they've already made judgment. They've already made a decision. They've shown their cards to say, this is what we want to do with this guy. We want to take him out. But we don't have permission to do this without you. So they bring him to Pilate. And what it says in the text is because this is a Roman location, they can't go in where Pilate is. They can't set foot on that ground. Because if they do, then they'll be unclean for worship at Passover, which basically means they won't be able to be a part of things coming up over the next few days because they'll be unclean, ceremonially unclean. But this is the irony of this moment. Like John's gospel is filled with so much irony. The irony here is they're conscious of their legalism, right? So they're like, we can't go into this Roman location. That's where it starts. So Pilate comes out to us. And why does Pilate come out? Because they're trying to manipulate the Roman governor to permit them to execute someone who's innocent. Where's the bigger infraction against God? Is it the murder of someone who's innocent, or is it the walking into a piece of land that they're not supposed to according to their own rules and their own governance? Because their spirits are convicted about that. We can't go in there, or we'll be unclean for Passover. But they don't even think about how they would be unclean for arranging for the execution of someone who's innocent, who's done miracles, who claims to speak for God. It's just a fascinating irony. And then I think the other interesting irony here is that Pilate comes and he starts to question Jesus. And so he asks him, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus responds, as he often does, with a question. And what this tells us is, as much as we think in this moment that John is telling us that human beings are in control here, the Jews and Pilate and what their decision, that matters, John's actually subtly showing us that it's not Pilate who's in charge. It's not the Jewish religious leaders that are in charge. Even though Jesus has been arrested, Jesus is in charge. And even though Pilate seems to be inquiring and searching out Jesus, it's actually Jesus who's searching out Pilate. That's the fascinating turnaround, because Pilate says, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus responds, he says, "Are you asking this for yourself, or are you asking this because other people have told you to ask it?" Pilate gets kind of rattled and offended. He's like, "I'm not a Jew. Well, why do I care? Your people brought you to me, right?" And then Jesus turns the conversation, because Pilate's interest is, are you here to rival Caesar? Are you here to disrupt the Roman way of order? Because if you're disrupting the Roman order, then you and I have a problem. And Jesus says very clearly, in truth, he says, my kingdom is not one of the physical realm. It's not a geography kingdom. My kingdom is of a whole other kind. It's a spiritual kingdom. It's a family that I'm building. And Pilate doesn't quite know how to deal with that. He ends up just leaving, going outside. He's like, this guy's not guilty of anything, right? And that's kind of the conclusion he comes to. He's like, you're trying to manipulate me. You're trying to get me. And then finally he subsides to the pressure and he offers people a choice. You want Jesus or do you want Barabbas? And we know historically Jesus did incredible miracles, but Jesus was pretty clear at this moment. He's not going to lead a revolution in the physical realm. And that's what people wanted, is they wanted a revolution against the Romans. And Barabbas, he was a revolutionary, and he's the one that was chosen. Once again, though, all of these things play out according to the Old Testament, from centuries before recorded, exactly as God said it would play out. This is not a chapter telling us of how Jesus is a victim. This is actually a chapter telling us Jesus is the victor. He's got the authority, and his life is not taken by anyone, but he lays his life down for you and for me. So as you prepare tomorrow for Good Friday, throughout today, I want to encourage you, remember, my Jesus is not a victim. He's the victor. He's the champion. His authority is unrivaled and it's consistent, even though it appears his hands are cuffed and his judgment is being issued out. All of these things played out as God said that they would. So take comfort, take peace in God's final authority that is unrivaled and unquestioned. And remember that as much as people come and want to explore and consider the claims of Jesus, ultimately it's Jesus revealing himself and searching us as much as we're searching him, more than we're searching him.